The third story. Calandrino, Bruno and Buffalamasisio, Geo coasting along the Mugnon in search of the heliotrope, and Calandrino thinketh to have found it. Accordingly he retiornith home, laden with stones, and his wife chidth. Whereupon, flying out into a rage, he batth her and recountth to his companions that which they know better than he. Pamphilo having made an end of his story, at which the ladies had laughed so much that they laugh yet, the queen bade Alyssa follow on, who, still laughing, began, I know not, charming ladies, if with a little story of mine, no less true than pleasant, I shall succeed in making you laugh as much as Pamphilo hath done with his, but I will do my endeavor thereof. In our city, then, which hath ever abounded in various fashions and strange folk, there was once, no great while since, a painter called Calandrino, a simple-witted man and of strange usances. He companied most of his time with other two painters, called the one Bruno and the other Buffalmacco, both very merry men, but otherwise well-advised and shrewd, who consorted with Calandrino, for that they oft-times had great diversion of his fashions and his simplicity. There was then also in Florence a young man of a mighty pleasant humor, and marvelously adroit in all he had a mind to do, astute and plausible, who was called Maso del Saggio, and who, hearing certain traits of Calandrino's simplicity, determined to amuse himself at his expense by putting off some cheat on him or causing him believe some strange thing. He chanced one day to come upon him in the church of San Giovanni, and seeing him intent upon the carved work and paintings of the pyx, which is upon the altar of the said church, and which had then not long been placed there, he judged the place and time opportune for carrying his intent into execution. Accordingly, acquainting a friend of his with that which he purposed to do, they both drew near unto the place where Calandrino sat alone, and feigning not to see him, fell discoursing together of the virtues of divers stones, whereof Maso spoke as authoritatively as if he had been a great and famous lapidary. Calandrino gave ear to their talk, and presently, seeing that it was no secret, he rose to his feet and joined himself to them, to the no small satisfaction of Maso, who, pursuing his discourse, was asked by Calandrino where these wonder-working stones were to be found. Maso replied that the most of them were found in Berlinzone, a city of the Basques, in a country called Bengodi, where the vines are tied up with sausages, and a goose is to be had for a farthing and a gosling into the bargain, and that there was a mountain all of grated Parmesan cheese, whereon abode folk who did nothing but make macaroni and ravioli and cook them in capon broth, after which they threw them down thence, and whoso got most thereof had most. And that hard by ran a rivulet of vernage, the best ever was drunk, without a drop of water therein. Marry, cried Calandrino, that were a fine country, but tell me, what is done with the capons that they boil for broth? Quoth Maso, the Basques eat them all. Then said Calandrino, wast thou ever there? Was I ever there, quotha? Replied Maso. If I have been there once, I have been there 1,000 times. And how many miles is it distant hence? Asked Calandrino, and Maso, how many? 1,000,000 or more, you might count them all night and not know. Then, said Calandrino, it must be farther off than the Abruzzi. Aye, indeed, answered Maso, it is a trifle farther. Footnote 372. A play upon the double meaning of a denaggio, which signifies also for money. Footnote 373. A kind of risole made of eggs, sweet herbs, and cheese. Calandrino, like a simpleton as he was, hearing Maso tell all this with an assured air and without laughing, gave such credence thereto as can be given to whatsoever verity is most manifest, and so, holding it for truth, said, That is overfar for my money. Though, were it nearer, I tell thee aright I would go thither with thee once upon a time, if but to see the macaroni come tumbling headlong down and take my fill thereof. But tell me, God keep thee merry, is there none of those wonder-working stones to be found in these parts? Aye, is there, answered Maso. There be two kinds of stones of very great virtue found here. The first are the grits of Sedignano and Montisci, by virtue whereof, when they are wrought into millstones, flour is made. Wherefore it is said in those parts that grace cometh from God and millstones from Montisci. But there is such great plenty of these grits, that they are as little prized with us as emeralds with the folk over yonder, where they have mountains of them bigger than Mount Morlo, which shine in the middle of the night, I warrant thee. And thou must know that whoso should cause set fine and perfect millstones, before they are pierced, in rings and carry them to the soldan, might have for them what he would. The other is what we lapidaries call heliotrope, a stone of exceeding great virtue, for that whoso hath it about him is not seen of any other person whereas he is not, what while he holdeth it. Quoth Calandrino, these be indeed great virtues, but where is this second stone found? To which Maso replied that it was commonly found in the Mugnon. What bigness is this stone? Asked Calandrino, and what is its color? Quoth Maso, it is of various sizes, some more and some less, but all are well nigh black of color. Calandrino noted all this in himself, and feigning to have other what to do, took leave of Maso, inwardly determined to go seek the stone in question, but bethought himself not to do it without the knowledge of Bruno and Buffalmacco, whom he most particularly affected. Accordingly he addressed himself to seek for them, so they might, without delay and before any else, set about the search, and spent all the rest of the morning seeking them. At last, when it was past none, he remembered him that they were a work in the ladies' convent at Faenza, and leaving all his other business, he betook himself thither well nigh at a run, notwithstanding the great heat. As soon as he saw them, he called them and bespoke them thus. Comrades, and you will hearken to me, we may become the richest men in all Florence, for that I have learned from a man worthy of belief that in the Mugnon is to be found a stone, which whoso carrieth about him is not seen of any. Wherefore meseemeth we were best go thither in quest thereof without delay, ere any forestall us. We shall certainly find it, for that I know it well. And when we have gotten it, what have we to do but put it in our poke and getting us to the money changers' tables, which you know stands still laden with groats and florins, take as much as we will thereof. None will see us, and so may we grow rich of a sudden, without having to smear walls all day long, snail fashion. Bruno and Buffalmacco, hearing this, fell a-laughing in their sleeves, and eyeing each other askance, made a show of exceeding wonderment and praised Calandrino's counsel. But Bruno asked how the stone in question was called. Calandrino, who was a clod-pated fellow, had already forgotten the name, wherefore quoth he, what have we to do with the name, since we know the virtue of the stone? Meseemeth we were best go about the quest without more ado. Well then, said Bruno, how is it fashioned? It is of all fashions, replied Calandrino, but all are well nigh black, wherefore meseemeth that what we have to do is to gather up all the black stones we see till we happen upon the right. So let us lose no time, but get us gone. Quoth Bruno, wait a while, and turning to his comrade said, methinketh Calandrino saith well. But meseemeth this is no season for the search, for that the sun is high and shineth full upon the Mugnon, where it hath dried all the stones, so that certain of those that be there appear presently white, which of a morning, ere the sun have dried them, show black. More by token that, today being a working day, there be many folk, on one occasion or another abroad along the banks, who, seeing us, may guess what we are about and maybe do likewise, whereby the stone may come to their hands, and we shall have lost the trot for the amble. Meseemeth, and you be of the same way of thinking, that this is a business to be undertaken of a morning, weenas the black may be the better known from the white, and of a holiday, when there will be none there to see us. Buffalmacco commended Bruno's counsel, and Calandrino fell in therewith. Wherefore they agreed to go seek for the stone all three on the following Sunday morning, and Calandrino besought them over all else not to say a word of the matter to anyone alive, for that it had been imparted to him in confidence, and after told them that which he had heard tell of the land of Bengodi, affirming with an oath that it was as he said. As soon as he had taken his leave, the two others agreed with each other what they should do in the matter, and Calandrino impatiently awaited the Sunday morning. Which being come, he arose at break of day and called his friends, with whom he sallied forth of the city by the San Gallo gate, and descending into the bed of the Mugnon, began to go searching downstream for the stone. Calandrino, as the eagerest of the three, went on before, skipping nimbly hither and thither, and whenever he espied any black stone, he pounced upon it and picking it up, thrust it into his bosom. His comrades followed after him, picking up now one stone and now another. But Calandrino had not gone far before he had his bosom full of stones. Wherefore, gathering up the skirts of his groan, which was not cut Flanders fashion, he tucked them well into his surcingle all round, and made an ample lap thereof. However, it was no great while ere he had filled it, and making a lap on like wise of his mantle, soon filled this also with stones. Presently the two others seeing that he had got his load, and that dinner time drew nigh, quoth Bruno to Buffalmacco, in accordance with the plan concerted between them, Where is Calandrino? Buffalmacco, who saw him hard by, turned about and looking now here and now there, answered, I know not, but he was before us but now. But now, quotha, cried Bruno. I warrant you he is presently at home at dinner, and hath left us to play the fool here, seeking black stones down the Mugnon. Egad, rejoined Buffalmacco, he hath done well to make mock of us and leave us here, since we were fools enough to credit him. Marry, who but we had been simple enough to believe that a stone of such virtue was to be found in the Mugnon? Calandrino, hearing this, concluded that the heliotrope had fallen into his hands, and that by virtue thereof they saw him not. Albeit he was present with them, and rejoiced beyond measure at such a piece of good luck, answered them not a word, but determined to return. Wherefore, turning back, he set off homeward. Buffalmacco, seeing this, said to Bruno, What shall we do? Why do we not get us gone? Whereto Bruno answered, Let us be gone. But I vow to God that Calandrino shall never again serve me thus, and were I presently near him as I have been all the morning, I would give him such a clout on the shins with this stone that he should have cause to remember this trick for maybe a month to come. To say this and to let fly at Calandrino's shins with the stone were one and the same thing, and the latter, feeling the pain, lifted up his leg and began to puff and blow, but yet held his peace and fared on. Presently Buffalmacco took one of the flints he had picked up and said to Bruno, Look at this fine flint, here should go for Calandrino's loins. So saying, he let fly and dealt him a sore rap in the small of the back with the stone. Brief, on this wise, now with one word and now with another, they went pelting him up the Mugnon till they came to the San Gallo gate, where they threw down the stones they had gathered and halted a while at the custom house. The officers, forewarned by them, feigned not to see Calandrino and let him pass, laughing heartily at the jest, whilst he, without stopping, made straight for his house, which was near the Canto alla Macchina, and fortune so far favored the cheat that none accosted him, as he came up the stream and after through the city, as, indeed, he met with few, for that well-nigh every one was at dinner. Accordingly he reached his house, thus laden, and as chance would have it, his wife, a fair and virtuous lady, by name Mistress Tessa, was at the stairhead. Seeing him come and somewhat provoked at his long tarriance, she began to rail at him, saying, Devil take the man. Wilt thou never think to come home betimes? All the folk have already dined weenas thou comest back to dinner. Calandrino, hearing this and finding that he was seen, was overwhelmed with chagrin and vexation, and cried out, Alack, wicked woman that thou art, wast thou there? Thou hast undone me, but by God his faith I will pay thee therefore. Therewithal he ran up to a little saloon he had, and there disburdened himself of the mass of stones he had brought home. Then, running in a fury at his wife, he laid hold of her by the hair, and throwing her down at his feet, cuffed and kicked her in every part as long as he could wag his arms and legs, without leaving a hair on her head or a bone in her body that was not beaten to a mash, nor did it avail her aught to cry him mercy with clasped hands. Meanwhile Bruno and Buffalmacco, after laughing a while with the keepers of the gate, proceeded with slow step to follow Calandrino afar off, and presently coming to the door of his house, heard the cruel beating he was in act to give his wife. Whereupon, making a show of having but then come back, they called Calandrino, who came to the window, all a sweat and red with anger and vexation, and prayed them come up to him. Accordingly they went up, making believe to be somewhat vexed, and seeing the room full of stones and the lady, all torn and dishevelled and black and blue in the face for bruises, weeping piteously in one corner of the room, whilst Calandrino sat in another, untrussed and panting like one forespent, eyed them a while, then said, What is this, Calandrino? Art thou for building, that we see all these stones here? And Mistress Tessa, what aileth her? It seemeth thou hast beaten her. What is all this ado? Calandrino, wearied with the weight of the stones and the fury with which he had beaten his wife, no less than with chagrin for the luck which him seemed he had lost, could not muster breath to give them aught but broken words in reply. Wherefore, as he delayed to answer, Buffalmacco went on, Harkye, Calandrino, whatever other cause for anger thou mightest have had, thou shouldst not have fooled us as thou hast done. In that, after thou hadst carried us off to seek with thee for the wonder-working stone, thou leftest us in the mugnon, like a couple of gulls, and madest off home, without saying so much as God be with you or devil. The which we take exceeding ill. But assuredly this shall be the last trick thou shalt ever play us. Therewithal Calandrino, enforcing himself, answered, Comrades, be not angered, the case standeth otherwise than as you deem. I, unlucky wretch that I am, had found the stone in question, and you shall hear if I tell truth. When first you questioned one another of me, I was less than 60 yards distant from you. But seeing that you made off and saw me not, I went on before you and came back hither, still keeping a little in front of you. Then, beginning from the beginning, he recounted to them all that they had said and done first and last, and showed them how the stones had served his back and shins. After which, and I may tell you, continued he, that, when as I entered in at the gate, with all these stones about me which you see here, there was nothing said to me, albeit you know how vexatious and tiresome these gatekeepers used to be in wanting to see everything. More by token that I met by the way several of my friends and gossips, who are still wont to accost me and invite me to drink. But none of them said a word to me, no, nor half a word, as those who saw me not. At last, being come home hither, this accursed devil of a woman presented herself before me, for that, as you know, women cause everything lose its virtue. Wherefore I, who might else have called myself the luckiest man in Florence, am become the most unlucky. For this I have beaten her as long as I could wag my fists, and I know not what hindereth me from slitting her wes end. Accursed be the hour when first I saw her, and when she came to me in this house. Then, flaming out into fresh anger, he offered to rise and beat her anew. Footnote 376. Sforzendosi, i.e. recovering his wind with an effort. Bruno and Buffalmacco, hearing all this, made believe to marvel exceedingly, and often confirmed that which Calandrino said, albeit they had the while so great a mind to laugh that they were like to burst. But seeing him start up in a rage to beat his wife again, they rose upon him and withheld him, avouching that the lady was nowise at fault, but that he had only himself to blame for that which had happened, since he knew that women caused things to lose their virtue, and had not bidden her beware of appearing before him that day. And that God had bereft him of foresight to provide against this, either for that the adventure was not to be his, or because he had had it in mind to cozen his comrades, to whom he should have discovered the matter, as soon as he perceived that he had found the stone. Brief after many words, they made peace, not without much ado, between him and the woebegone lady, and went their ways, leaving him disconsolate, with the house full of stones. The fourth story. The rector of Fiesole, Loveth, a widow lady, but is not loved by her and thinking to lie with her, Lieth with a serving wench of hers. Whilst, the lady's brothers caused the bishop find him in this case. Elissa being come to the end of her story, which she had related to the no small pleasure of all the company, the queen turned to Emilia, and signified to her her wish that she should follow after with her story. Whereupon she promptly began thus. I have not forgotten, noble ladies, that it hath already been shown, in sundry of the foregoing stories, how much we women are exposed to the importunities of the priests and friars and clergy of every kind. But seeing that so much cannot be said thereof, but that yet more will remain to say, I purpose, to boot, to tell you a story of a rector, who, maugre all the world, would e'en have a gentlewoman wish him well, whether she would or not. Whereupon she, like a very discreet woman as she was, used him as he deserved. Footnote 377, i.e. love him, grant him her favors. See ante passum. As all of you know, Fiesole, whose hill we can see hence, was once a very great and ancient city, nor, albeit it is nowadays all undone, hath it ever ceased to be, as it is yet, the seat of a bishop. Near the cathedral church there a widow lady of noble birth, by name Madame Picarda, had an estate, where, for that she was not overwell to do, she abode the most part of the year in a house of hers that was not very big, and with her 2 brothers of hers, very courteous and worthy youths. It chanced that, the lady frequenting the cathedral church, and being yet very young and fair and agreeable, the rector of the church became so sore enamored of her that he could think of nothing else, and after a while, making bold to discover his mind to her, he prayed her accept of his love and love him as he loved her. Now he was already old in years, but very young in wit, malapert and arrogant and presumptuous in the extreme, with manners and fashions full of conceit and ill grace, and withal so froward and ill-conditioned that there was none who wished him well. And if any had scant regard for him, it was the lady in question, who not only wished him no whit of good, but hated him worse than the megrims. Wherefore, like a discreet woman as she was, she answered him, Sir, that you love me should be mighty pleasing to me, who am bound to love you and will gladly do so. But between your love and mine, nothing unseemly should ever befall. You are my spiritual father and a priest, and are presently well stricken in years, all which things should make you both modest and chaste. Whilst I, on the other hand, am no girl, nor do these amorous toys beseem my present condition, for that I am a widow, and you well know what discretion is required in widows. Wherefore I pray you hold me excused, for that I shall never love you after the fashion whereof you require me, nor do I wish to be thus loved of you. The rector could get of her no other answer for that time, but noise daunted or disheartened by the first rebuff, solicited her again and again with the most overweening importunity, both by letter and message, nay, even by word of mouth, weenas he saw her come into the church. Wherefore, her seeming that this was too great and too grievous an annoy, she cast about to rid herself of him after such a fashion as he deserved, since she could no otherwise, but would do not ere she had taken counsel with her brothers. Accordingly, she acquainted them with the rector's behavior towards her, and that which she purposed to do, and having therein full license from them, went a few days after to the church, as was her wont. As soon as the rector saw her, he came up to her, and with his usual assurance, accosted her familiarly. The lady received him with a cheerful countenance, and withdrawing apart with him, after he had said many words to her in his wonted style, she heaved a great sigh and said, Sir, I have heard that there is no fortalice so strong, but that, being every day assaulted, it cometh at last to be taken, and this I can very well see to have happened to myself. For that you have so closely beset me with soft words, and with one complaisance and another, that you have made me break my resolve, and I am now disposed, since I please you thus, to consent to be yours. Gramercy, madam, answered the rector, overjoyed, to tell you the truth, I have often wondered how you could hold out so long, considering that never did the like betide me with any woman. Nay, I have said whiles, were women of silver, they would not be worth a farthing, for that not one of them would stand the hammer. But let that pass for the present. When and where can we be together? Wheredo, quoth the lady, sweet my lord, as for the when, it may be what time soever most pleaseth us, for that I have no husband to whom it behoveth me render an account of my nights, but for the where I know not how to contrive. How? Cried the priest. Why, in your house to be sure. Sir, answered the lady, you know I have 2 young brothers, who come and go about the house with their companions day and night, and my house is not over big, wherefore it may not be there, except one chose to abide their mute fashion, without saying a word or making the least sound, and be in the dark, after the manner of the blind. And you be content to do this, it might be, for they meddle not with my bedchamber, but their own is so close to mine that one cannot whisper the least word without its being heard. Madam, answered the rector, this shall not hinder us for a night or two, against bethink me where we may foregather more at ease. Quoth she, Sir, let that rest with you, but of one thing I pray you, that this abide secret, so no word be ever known thereof. Madam, replied he, have no fear for that, but and it may be make shift that we shall foregather this evening. With all my heart, said the lady, and appointing him how and when he should come, she took leave of him and returned home. Now she had a serving wench who was not over young, but had the foulest and worst favoured visnomy was ever seen. For she had a nose flattened sore, a mouth all awry, thick lips and great ill-set teeth moreover. She inclined to squint, nor was ever without sore eyes, and had a green and yellow complexion, which gave her the air of having passed the summer not at Feasel, but at Sinigaglia. Besides all this, she was hip-shot and a thought crooked on the right side. Her name was Ciuta, but for that she had such a dog's visnomy of her own, she was called of every one Ciutaza. And for all she was misshapen of her person, she was not without a spice of roguishness. The lady called her and said to her, Harkye, Ciutaza, and thou wilt do me a service this night. I will give thee a fine new shift. Ciutaza, hearing speak of the shift, answered, Madam, so you give me a shift, I will cast myself into the fire, let alone other what. Well then, said her mistress, I would have thee lie tonight with a man in my bed and load him with caresses, but take good care not to say a word, lest thou be heard by my brothers, who, as thou knowest, sleep in the next room, and after I will give thee the shift. Quoth Ciutaza, with all my heart. I will lie with 6 men, if need be, let alone one. Accordingly, at nightfall, my lord the rector made his appearance, according to agreement, whilst the 2 young men by the lady's appointment were in their bedchamber and took good care to make themselves heard. Wherefore he entered the lady's chamber in silence and darkness and betook himself, as she had bidden him, straight to the bed, whither on her part came Ciutaza, who had been well lessoned by the lady of that which she had to do. My lord rector, thinking he had his mistress beside him, caught Ciutaza in his arms and fell to kissing her, without saying a word, and she him. Whereupon he proceeded to solace himself with her, taking, as he thought, possession of the long-desired good. The lady, having done this, charged her brothers carry the rest of the plot into execution, wherefore, stealing softly out of the chamber, they made for the great square, and fortune was more favorable to them than they themselves asked in that which they had a mind to do, inasmuch as, the heat being great, the bishop had inquired for the 2 young gentlemen, so he might go a-pleasuring to their house and drink with them. But seeing them coming, he acquainted them with his wish and returned with them to their house, where, entering a cool little courtyard of theirs, in which were many flambeaux alight, he drank with great pleasure of an excellent wine of theirs. When he had drunken, the young men said to him, My lord, since you have done us so much favor as to deign to visit this our poor house, whereto we came to invite you, we would have you be pleased to view a small matter with which we would fain show you. The bishop answered that he would well, whereupon one of the young men, taking a lighted flambeau in his hand, made for the chamber where my lord rector lay with Ciutaza, followed by the bishop and all the rest. The rector, to arrive the quicklier at his journey's end, had hastened to take horse, and had already ridden more than 3 miles before they came thither. Wherefore, being somewhat weary, he had, notwithstanding the heat, fallen asleep with Ciutaza in his arms. Accordingly, when the young man entered the chamber, light in hand, and after him the bishop and all the others, he was shown to the prelate in this plight. Whereupon he awoke, and seeing the light and the folk about him, was sore abashed and hid his head for fear under the bedclothes. The bishop gave him a sound rating, and made him put out his head and see with whom he had lain. Whereupon the rector, understanding the trick that had been played him of the lady, what with this, and what with the disgrace him seemed he had gotten, became of a sudden the wofullest man that was I. Then, having, by the bishop's commandment, reclad himself, he was dispatched to his house under good guard, to suffer sore penance for the sin he had committed. The bishop presently inquiring how it came to pass that he had gone thither to lie with Ciutaza, the young men orderly related everything to him, which having heard, he greatly commended both the lady and her brothers for that, without choosing to imbrue their hands in the blood of a priest, they had entreated him as he deserved. As for the rector, he caused him bewail his offense 40 days' space, but love and despite made him rue it for more than 49, more by token that, for a great while after, he could never go abroad but the children would point at him, and say, See, there is he who lay with Ciutaza. The which was so sore an annoy to him that he was like to go mad therefore. On such wise did the worthy lady rid herself of the importunity of the malapert rector, and Ciutaza gained the shift and a merry night. Footnote 380. Quarantanov, a proverbial expression for an indefinite number. The 5th story. 3 young men pull the breeches off a Marchegan judge in Florence, what while he is on the bench, administering justice. Emilia having made an end of her story, and the widow lady having been commended of all, the queen looked to Philostrato and said, It is now thy turn to tell. He answered promptly that he was ready and began. Delightsome ladies, the mention by Alyssa a little before of a certain young man, to wit, Maso del Saggio, hath caused me leave a story, purpose to tell you. So I may relate to you one of him and certain companions of his, which, if albeit it is nowise unseemly, it offer certain expressions which you think shame to use, is nathless so laughable that I will e'en tell it. As you may all have heard, there come oftentimes to our city governors from the marches of Ancona, who are commonly mean-spirited folk, and so paltry and sordid of life, that their every fashion seemeth not other than a lousy cadger's trick. And of this innate paltriness and avarice, they bring with them judges and notaries, who seem men taken from the plough-tail, or the cobbler's stall rather than from the schools of law. Now, one of these being come hither for provost. Among the many judges whom he brought with him was one who styled himself Messer Nicola de San Lepidio, and who had more the air of a tinker than of aught else, and he was set with other judges to hear criminal causes. As it oft happeneth that, for all the townsfolk have naught in the world to do at the courts of law, yet by times they go thither. It befell that Maso del Saggio went thither one morning, in quest of a friend of his, and chancing to cast his eyes whereas this said Messer Nicola sat, him seemed that here was a rare outlandish kind of wild fowl. Accordingly, he went on to examine him from head to foot, and albeit he saw him with the miniver bonnet on his head all black with smoke and grease, and a paltry inkhorn at his girdle, a gown longer than his mantle and store of other things all foreign to a man of good breeding and manners, yet of all these the most notable to his thinking was a pair of breeches, the backside whereof, as the judge sat, with his clothes standing open in front for straightness, he perceived came halfway down his legs. Thereupon, without tarrying longer to look upon him, he left him with whom he went seeking and beginning a new quest, presently found two comrades of his, called one Ribai and the other Matiuso, men much of the same mad humor as himself, and said to them, "As you tender me, come with me to the law courts, for I wish to show you the rarest scarecrow you ever saw." Accordingly, carrying them to the courthouse, he showed them the aforesaid judge and his breeches, whereat they fell a-laughing, as soon as they caught sight of him afar off. Then, drawing nearer to the platform whereon my lord judge sat, they saw that one might lightly pass thereunder, and that, moreover, the boards under his feet were so broken that one might with great ease thrust his hand and arm between them. Whereupon quoth Maso to his comrades, "Needs must we pull him off those breeches of his altogether, for that it may very well be done." Each of the others had already seen how. Wherefore, having agreed among themselves what they should say and do, they returned thither next morning, when, the court being very full of folk, Matiuso, without being seen of any, crept under the bench and posted himself immediately beneath the judge's feet. Meanwhile, Maso came up to my lord judge on one side, and taking him by the skirt of his gown, whilst Ribai did the like on the other side, began to say, my lord, I pray you for God's sake, ere yonder scurvy thief on the other side of you go elsewhere, make him restore me a pair of saddle-bags whereof he hath saith indeed he did it not. But I saw him, not a month ago, in act to have them resoled." Ribai on his side cried out with all his might, "Believe him not, my lord, he is an arrant knave, and for that he knoweth I am come to lay a complaint against him for a pair of saddle-bags whereof he hath robbed me, he cometh now with his story of the buthos, which I have had in my house this many a day. And you believe me not, I can bring you to witness my next-door neighbor Trecca and Grassa the tripewoman, and one who goeth gathering the sweepings from Santa Magia at Vergiaza, who saw him when he came back from the country." Maso, on the other hand, suffered not Ribai to speak, but bawled his loudest, whereupon the other but shouted the more. The judge stood up and leaned towards them, so he might the better apprehend what they had to say, wherefore Matiuso, watching his opportunity, thrust his hand between the crack of the boards, and laying hold of Messer Nicola's galligaskins by the breech, tugged at them amen. The breeches came down incontinent, for that the judge was lean and lank of the crupper. Whereupon, feeling this and knowing not what it might be, he would have sat down again and pulled his skirts forward to cover himself. But Maso on the one side and Ribai on the other still held him fast and cried out, "My lord, you do ill not to do me justice, and to seek to avoid hearing me and get you gone otherwhere. There be no writs granted in this city for such small matters as this." So saying, they held him fast by the clothes on such wise that all who were in the court perceived that his breeches had been pulled down. However, Matiuso, after he had held them a while, let them go, and coming forth from under the platform, made off out of the court and went his way without being seen. Whereupon quoth Ribai, him seeming he had done enough, "I vow to God I will appeal to the syndicate." Whilst Maso, on his part, let go the mantle and said, "Nay, I will e'en come hither again and again, until such time as I find you not hindered as you seem to be this morning." So saying, they both made off as quickly as they might, each on his own side, whilst my lord judge pulled up his breeches in everyone's presence, as if he were arisen from sleep. Then, perceiving how the case stood, he inquired whither they were gone who were at difference and at the buthos and the saddle-bags. But they were not to be found, whereupon he began to swear by cock's bowels that need must he know, and learn if it were the one at Florence to pull down the judge's breeches, weenas they sat on the judicial bench. The provost, on his part, hearing of this, made a great stir. But his friends having shown him that this had only been done to give him notice that the Florentines right well understood how, whereas he should have brought judges, he had brought them sorry patches, to have them better cheap, he thought it best to hold his peace, and so the thing went no farther for the nonce. The sixth story. Bruno and Bufflmacco, having stolen a pig from Calandirano, make him try the ordeal with ginger boluses and sack, and give him, instead of the ginger, 2 dog balls compounded with aloes, whereby it apparth that he himself hath had the pig and they make him pay blackmail, and he would not have them tell his wife. No sooner had Philostrato dispatched his story, which had given rise to many a laugh, than the queen bade Philomna follow on, whereupon she began. Gracious ladies, even as Philostrato was led by the mention of Maso to tell the story which you have just heard from him, so neither more nor less am I moved by that of Calandrino and his friends to tell you another of them, which methinketh will please you. Who Calandrino, Bruno, and Bufflmacco were I need not explain to you, for that you have already heard it well enough. Wherefore, to proceed with my story, I must tell you that Calandrino owned a little farm at no great distance from Florence, that he had had to his wife's dowry. From this farm, amongst other things that he got thence, he had every year a pig, and it was his wont still to betake himself thither, he and his wife, and kill the pig and have it salted on the spot. It chanced one year that, his wife being somewhat ailing, he went himself to kill the pig, which Bruno and Bufflmacco hearing, and knowing that his wife was not gone to the farm with him, they repaired to a priest, very great friend of theirs and a neighbor of Calandrino, to sojourn some days with him. Now Calandrino had that very morning killed the pig, and seeing them with the priest, called to them, saying, "You are welcome. I would fain have you see what a good husband I am." Then carrying them into the house, he showed them the pig, which they seeing to be a very fine one, and understanding from Calandrino that he meant to salt it down for his family, "Good lack," quoth Bruno to him, "what a ninny thou art. Sell it, and let us make merry with the price, and tell thy wife that it hath been stolen from thee." "Nay," answered Calandrino, "she would never believe it and would drive me out of the house. Spare your pains, for I will never do it." And many were the words, but they availed nothing. Calandrino invited them to supper, but with so ill a grace that they refused to sup there and took their leave of him, whereupon quoth Bruno and Bufflmacco, "What sayest thou to stealing yonder pig from him tonight?" "Marry," replied the other, "how can we do it?" Quoth Bruno, "I can see how well enough, and he remove it not from where it was but now." "Then," rejoined his companion, "let us do it." "Why should we not? And after we will make merry over it with the parson here." The priest answered that he would well, and Bruno said, "Here must some little art be used. Thou knowest, Bufflmacco, how niggardly Calandrino is, and how gladly he drinketh when others pay. Let us go and carry him to the tavern, where the priest shall make believe to pay the whole scot in our honor, nor suffer him to pay aught. Calandrino will soon grow fuddled, and then we can manage it lightly enough, for that he is alone in the house." As he said, so they did, and Calandrino, seeing that the priest suffered none to pay, gave himself up to drinking and took in a good load, albeit it needed no great matter to make him drunk. It was pretty late at night when they left the tavern, and Calandrino, without troubling himself about supper, went straight home, where, thinking to have shut the door, he left it open and betook himself to bed. Bufflmacco and Bruno went off to sup with the priest, and after supper repaired quietly to Calandrino's house, carrying with them certain implements wherewithal to break in whereas Bruno had appointed it. But, finding the door open, they entered and unhooking the pig, carried it off to the priest's house, where they laid it up and betook themselves to sleep. On the morrow, Calandrino, having slept off the fumes of the wine, arose in the morning and going down, missed his pig and saw the door open. Whereupon he questioned this one, and that if they knew who had taken it, and getting no news of it, began to make a great outcry, saying, "Woe is me, miserable wretch that I am!" For that the pig had been stolen from him. As soon as Bruno and Bufflmacco were risen, they repaired to Calandrino's house, to hear what he would say anent the pig, and he no sooner saw them than he called out to them, well nigh weeping, and said, "Woe's me, comrades mine, my pig hath been stolen from me." Whereupon Bruno came up to him and said softly, It is a marvel that thou hast been wise for once. Alack, replied Calandrino, indeed I say sooth. That's the thing to say, quoth Bruno. Make a great outcry, so it may well appear that it is e'en as thou say'st. Therewithal Calandrino bawled out yet loudlier, saying, Cock's body, I tell thee it hath been stolen from me in good earnest. Good, good, replied Bruno. That's the way to speak. Cry out lustily, make thyself well heard, so it may seem true. Quoth Calandrino, thou wouldst make me give my soul to the fiend. I tell thee, and thou believest me not. May I be strung up by the neck and it have not been stolen from me? Good lack, cried Bruno. How can that be? I saw it here but yesterday. Thinkest thou to make me believe that it hath flown away? Quoth Calandrino, it is as I tell thee. Good lack, repeated Bruno, can it be? Certes, replied Calandrino, it is so, more by token that I am undone and know not how I shall return home. My wife will never believe me, or even if she do, I shall have no peace with her this year to come. Quoth Bruno, so God save me, this is ill done, if it be true. But thou knowest, Calandrino, I lessoned thee yesterday to say thus, and I would not have thee at once cozen thy wife and us. Therewithal Calandrino fell to crying out and saying, Alack, why will you drive me to desperation, and make me blaspheme God and the saints? I tell you the pig was stolen from me yesternight. Then said Bufflemacco, if it be so indeed, we must cast about for a means of having it again, and we may contrive it. But what means, asked Calandrino, can we find? Quoth Bufflemacco, we may be sure that there hath come none from the Indies to rob thee of thy pig. The thief must have been some one of thy neighbors. And thou canst make shift to assemble them. I know how to work the ordeal by bread and cheese, and we will presently see for certain who hath had it. Ay, put in Bruno, thou wouldst make a fine thing of bread and cheese with such gentry as we have about here. For one of them I am certain hath had the pig, and he would smoke the trap and would not come. How then shall we do? Asked Bufflemacco, and Bruno said, we must do it with ginger boluses and good vernage and invite them to drink. They will suspect nothing and come, and the ginger boluses can be blessed even as the bread and cheese. Quoth Bufflemacco, indeed, thou say'st sooth. What say'st thou, Calandrino? Shall's do't, nay, replied the gull, I pray you thereof for the love of God, for did I but know who hath had it, I should hold myself half consoled. Marry then, said Bruno, I am ready to go to Florence to oblige thee for the things aforesaid, so thou wilt give me the money. Now Calandrino had maybe 40 shillings, which he gave him, and Bruno accordingly repaired to Florence to a friend of his, a druggist, of whom he bought a pound of fine ginger boluses, and caused compound a couple of dog balls with fresh confect of hepatic aloes. After which, he let cover these latter with sugar, like the others, and set thereon a privy mark by which he might very well know them, so he should not mistake them nor change them. Then, buying a flask of good vernage, he returned to Calandrino in the country and said to him, Do thou tomorrow morning invite those whom thou suspectest to drink with thee. It is a holiday, and all will willingly come. Meanwhile, Bufflemacco and I will tonight make the conjuration over the pills and bring them to thee tomorrow morning at home. And for the love of the eye will administer them myself, and do and say that which is to be said and done. Calandrino did as he said, and assembled on the following morning a goodly company of such young Florentines as were presently about the village and of husbandmen. Whereupon Bruno and Bufflemacco came with a box of pills and the flask of wine, and made the folk stand in a ring. Then said Bruno, Gentlemen, needs must I tell you the reason wherefore you are here, so that, if aught betide that please you not, you may have no cause to complain of me. Calandrino here was robbed yesternight of a fine pig, nor can he find who hath had it. And for that none other than some one of us who are here can have stolen it from him, he proffereth each of you, that he may discover who hath had it, one of these pills to eat and a draught of wine. Now you must know that he who hath had the pig will not be able to swallow the pill. Nay, it will seem to him more bitter than poison, and he will spit it out. Wherefore, rather than that shame be done him in the presence of so many, he were better tell it to the parson by way of confession, and I will proceed no farther with this matter. All who were there declared that they would willingly eat of the pills, whereupon Bruno ranged them in order and set Calandrino among them. Then, beginning at one end of the line, he proceeded to give each his bolus, and whenas he came over against Calandrino, he took one of the dog balls and put it into his hand. Calandrino clapped it incontinent into his mouth and began to chew it. But no sooner did his tongue taste the aloes than he spat it out again, being unable to brook the bitterness. Meanwhile, each was looking other in the face to see who should spit out his bolus, and whilst Bruno, not having made an end of serving them out, went on to do so, feigning to pay no heed to Calandrino's doing, he heard say behind him, "How now, Calandrino? What meaneth this?" Whereupon he turned suddenly round, and seeing that Calandrino had spat out his bolus, said, "Stay, maybe somewhat else hath caused him spit it out. Take another of them." Then, taking the other dog ball, he thrust it into Calandrino's mouth and went on to finish giving out the rest. If the first ball seemed bitter to Calandrino, the second was bitterer yet. But being ashamed to spit it out, he kept it a while in his mouth, chewing it and shedding tears that seemed hazelnuts so big they were, till at last, unable to hold out longer, he cast it forth, like as he had the first. Meanwhile Buffalmacco and Bruno gave the company to drink, and all, seeing this, declared that Calandrino had certainly stolen the pig from himself. Nay, there were those there who rated him roundly. After they were all gone, and the two rogues left alone with Calandrino, Buffalmacco said to him, "I still had it for certain that it was thou tookst the pig thyself, and wouldst fain make us believe that it had been stolen from thee, to escape giving us one poor while to drink of the moneys thou hadst for it." Calandrino, who was not yet quit of the bitter taste of the aloes, began to swear that he had not had it, and Buffalmacco said, "But in good earnest, comrade, what gottest thou for it?" "Was it 6 florins?" Calandrino, hearing this, began to wax desperate, and Bruno said, "Harkye, Calandrino, there was such an one in the company that ate and drank with us, who told me that thou hast a wench over yonder, whom thou keepest for thy pleasure, and to whom thou givest whatsoever thou canst scrape together, and that he held it for certain that thou hadst sent her the pig. Thou hast learned of late to play pranks of this kind. Thou carriedst us off t'other day down the Mugnon, picking up black stones, and weenas thou hadst gotten us aboard ship without biscuit. Thou madest off, and wouldst after have us believe that thou hadst found the magic stone. And now on like wise thou thinkest, by dint of oaths, to make us believe that the pig, which thou hast given away or more like sold, hath been stolen from thee. But we are used to thy tricks and know them. Thou shalt not avail to play us any more of them, and to be plain with thee, since we have been at pains to make the conjuration we mean that thou shalt give us 2 pairs of capons, else will we tell Mistress Tessa everything." Calandrino, seeing that he was not believed and him seeming he had had vexation enough, without having his wife scolding into the bargain, gave them 2 pairs of capons, which they carried off to Florence, after they had salted the pig, leaving Calandrino to digest the loss and the flouting as best he might. The 7th story. A scholar loveth a widow lady, who, being enamored of another, causeth spend one winter's night in the snow awaiting her, and he after coentirivth by his sleight, to have her abide naked, all one mid-July day, on the summit of a tower, exposed to flies and gads and sun. The ladies laughed amen at the unhappy Calandrino, and would have laughed yet more, but that it irked them to see him fleeced of the capons, to boot, by those who had already robbed him of the pig. But as soon as the end of the story was come, the queen charged Pampinea tell hers, and she promptly began thus: "It chanceth oft, dearest ladies, that craft is put to scorn by craft, and it is therefore a sign of little wit to delight in making mock of others. We have, for several stories, laughed amen at tricks that have been played upon folk, and whereof no vengeance is recorded to have been taken. But I purpose now to cause you have some compassion of a just retribution wreaked upon a townswoman of ours, on whose head her own cheat recoiled, and was retorted well nigh unto death. And the hearing of this will not be without profit unto you, for that henceforward you will the better keep yourselves from making mock of others, and in this you will show great good sense. Not many years ago there was in Florence a young lady, by name Elena, fair of favor and haughty of humor, of very gentle lineage and endowed with sufficient abundance of the goods of fortune, who, being widowed of her husband, chose never to marry again, for that she was enamored of a handsome and agreeable youth of her own choice. And with the aid of a maid of hers, in whom she put great trust, being quit of every other care, she often with marvelous delight gave herself a good time with him. In these days it chanced that a young gentleman of our city, by name Rinieri, having long studied in Paris, not for the sake of after selling his knowledge by retail, as many do, but to know the nature of things and their causes, the which excellently becometh a gentleman, returned thence to Florence and there lived citizen fashion, much honored as well for his nobility as for his learning. But as it chanceth often that those, who have the most experience of things profound, are the soonest snared of love, even so it befell this Ranieri. For, having one day repaired, by way of diversion, to an entertainment, there presented herself before his eyes the aforesaid Alina, clad all in black, as our widows go, and full, to his judgment, of such beauty and pleasantness as him seemed he had never beheld in any other woman. And in his heart he deemed that he might call himself blessed, whom God should vouchsafe to hold her naked in his arms. Then, furtively considering her once and again, and knowing that great things and precious were not to be acquired without travail, he altogether determined in himself to devote all his pains and all his diligence to the pleasing her, to the end that thereby he might gain her love, and so avail to have his fill of her. The young lady, who kept not her eyes fixed upon the nether world, but conceiting herself as much and more than as much as she was, moved them artfully hither and thither, gazing all about, and was quick to note who delighted to look upon her. Soon became aware of Ranieri, and said, laughing in herself, I have not come hither in vain today, for, and I mistake not, I have caught a woodcock by the bill. Accordingly, she fell to ogling him from time to time with the tail of her eye, and studied, inasmuch as she might, to let him see that she took note of him, thinking that the more men she allured and ensnared with her charms, so much the more of price would her beauty be, especially to him on whom she had bestowed it, together with her love. The learned scholar, laying aside philosophical speculations, turned all his thoughts to her and thinking to please her, inquired where she lived and proceeded to pass to and fro before her house, coloring his comings and goings with various pretexts, whilst the lady, idly glorying in this, for the reason already set out, made believe to take great pleasure in seeing him. Accordingly, he found means to clap up an acquaintance with her maid, and discovering to her his love, prayed her make interest for him with her mistress, so he might avail to have her favor. The maid promised freely, and told the lady, who hearkened with the heartiest laughter in the world, and said, Seest thou where yonder man cometh to lose the wit he hath brought back from Paris? Marry, we will give him that which he goeth seeking. And he bespeak thee again, do thou tell him that I love him far more than he loveth me, but that it behoveth me look to mine honor, so I may hold up my head with the other ladies, whereof and he be as wise as folks say, he will hold me so much the dearer. Alack, poor silly soul, she knew not aright, ladies mine, what it is to try conclusions with scholars. The maid went in search of Ranieri, and finding him, did that which had been enjoined her of her mistress, whereat he was overjoyed and proceeded to use more urgent entreaties, writing letters and sending presents, all of which were accepted, but he got nothing but vague and general answers, and on this wise she held him in play a great while. At last, to show her lover, to whom she had discovered everything and who was well somewhat vexed with her for this, and had conceived some jealousy of Ranieri, that he did wrong to suspect her thereof, she dispatched to the scholar, now grown very pressing, her maid, who told him, on her mistress's part, that she had never yet had an opportunity to do aught that might pleasure him since he had certified her of his love, but that on the occasion of the festival of the Nativity she hoped to be able to be with him. Wherefore, and it liked him, he was on the evening of the feast to come by night to her courtyard, whither she would go for him as first she might. At this the scholar was the gladdest man alive, and betook himself at the appointed time to his mistress's house, where he was carried by the maid into a courtyard, and being there locked in, proceeded to wait the lady's coming. The latter had that evening sent for her lover, and after she had supped merrily with him, she told him that which she purposed to do that night, adding, And thou mayst see for thyself what and how great is the love I have borne and bear him of whom thou hast taken a jealousy. The lover heard these words with great satisfaction, and was impatient to see by the fact that which the lady gave him to understand with words. It had by chance snowed hard during the day, and everything was covered with snow, wherefore the scholar had not long abidden in the courtyard before he began to feel colder than he could have wished. But looking to recruit himself speedily, he was fain to endure it with patience. Presently the lady said to her lover, Let us go look from a lattice what yonder fellow, of whom thou art waxed jealous, doth, and hear what he shall answer the maid, whom I have sent to parley with him. Accordingly they betook themselves to a lattice, and thence, seeing without being seen, they heard the maid from another lattice bespeak the scholar and say, Rinieri, my lady is the wofullest woman that was I, for that there is one of her brothers come hither tonight, who hath talked much with her, and after must needs sup with her, nor is yet gone away. But methinketh he will soon be gone, wherefore she hath not been able to come to thee, but will soon come now and prayeth thee not to take the waiting in ill part. Rinieri, believing this to be true, replied, Tell my lady to give herself no concern for me till such time as she can at her commodity come to me, but bid her do this as quickly as she may. The maid turned back into the house and betook herself to bed, whilst the lady said to her gallant, Well, how sayst thou? Thinkest thou that, an I wished him such weal as thou fearest, would suffer him stand a freezing down yonder? So saying, she betook herself to bed with her lover, who was now in part satisfied, and there they abode a great while in joyance and lease, laughing and making mock of the wretched scholar, who fared to and fro the while in the courtyard, making shift to warm himself with exercise, nor had whereas he might seat himself or shelter from the night damp. He cursed her brother's long stay with the lady, and took everything he heard for the opening of a door to him by her, but hoped in vain. The lady, having solaced herself with her lover till near upon midnight, said to him, How deemest thou, my soul, of our scholar? Whether seemeth to thee the greater, his wit or the love I bear him? Will the cold which I presently cause him suffer do away from thy mind the doubts which my pleasantries aroused therein the other day? Whereto he replied, Heart of my body, yes, I know right well that, like as thou art my good and my peace and my delight and all my hope, even so am I thine. Then, rejoined she, kiss me 1,000 times, so I may see if thou say sooth. Whereupon he clipped her fast in his arms and kissed her not 1,000, but more than 100,000 times. Then, after they had abidden a while in such discourse, the lady said, Mary, let us arise a little and go see if the fire is enidel spent, wherein this my new lover wrote me that he burnt all day long. Accordingly, they arose and getting them to the accustomed lattice, looked out into the courtyard, where they saw the scholar dancing a right merry jig on the snow, so fast and brisk that never had they seen the like, to the sound of the chattering of the teeth that he made for excess of cold. Whereupon quoth the lady, How sayst thou, sweet my hope? Seemeth to thee that I know how to make folk jig it without sound of trump or bagpipe? Whereto he answered, laughing, Ay dost thou, my chief delight. Quoth the lady, I will that we go down to the door, thou shalt abide quiet, whilst I bespeak him, and we shall hear what he will say. Belike we shall have no less diversion thereof than we had from seeing him. Accordingly, they softly opened the chamber and stole down to the door, where, without opening it enidel, the lady called to the scholar in a low voice by a little hole that was there. Rinieri, hearing himself called, praised God, taking it over soon for granted that he was to be presently admitted, and coming up to the door said, Here am I, madam, open for God's sake, for I die of cold. Oh, I, replied the lady, I know thou art a chilly one. Is then the cold so exceeding great, because, forsooth, there is a little snow about? I wot the nights are much colder in Paris. I cannot open to thee yet, for that accursed brother of mine, who came to sup with me tonight, is not yet gone, but he will soon be gone, and I will come incontinent to open to thee. I have but now very hardly stolen away from him, that I might come to exhort thee not to wax weary of waiting. Alack, madam, cried the scholar, I pray you for God's sake open to me, so I may abide within under cover, for that this little while past there is come on the thickest snow in the world, and it yet snoweth, and I will wait for you as long as it shall please you. Woe's me, sweet my treasure, replied the lady, that cannot I, for this door maketh so great a noise, ween as it is opened, that it would lightly be heard of my brother if I should open to thee, but I will go bid him begone, so I may after come back and open to thee. Then go quickly, rejoined he, and I prithee let make a good fire, so I may warm me as soon as I come in, for that I am grown so cold I can scarce feel myself. Quoth the lady, That should not be possible, and that be true which thou hast many a time written me, to wit, that thou burnest for the love of me. Now I must go, wait and be of good heart. Then, with her lover, who had heard all this with the utmost pleasure, she went back to bed, and that night they slept little, nay, they spent it well nigh all in dalliance and delight, and in making mock of Rinieri. Meanwhile the unhappy scholar, now well nigh grown a stork, so sore did his teeth chatter, perceiving at last that he was befooled, essayed again and again to open the door and sought and he might not avail to issue thence by another way. But finding no means thereunto, he fell arranging to and fro like a lion, cursing the foulness of the weather and the lady's malignity and the length of the night, together with his own credulity. Wherefore, being sore despited against his mistress, the long and ardent love he had borne her was suddenly changed to fierce and bitter hatred, and he revolved in himself many and various things, so he might find a means of revenge, the which he now desired far more eagerly than he had before desired to be with the lady. At last, after much long tarriance, the night drew near unto day, and the dawn began to appear. Whereupon the maid, who had been lessoned by the lady, coming down, opened the courtyard door, and feigning to have compassion of Rinieri, said, "Bad luck may he have who came hither yesterev. He hath kept us all night upon thorns, and hath caused thee freeze. But knowest thou what? Bear it with patience, for that which could not be tonight shall be another time. Indeed, I know naught could have happened that had been so displeasing to my lady." The despiteful scholar, like a wise man as he was, who knew that threats are but arms for the threatened, locked up in his breast that which untempered will would fain have vented, and said in a low voice, without anywise showing himself vexed, "In truth, I have had the worst night I ever had. But I have well apprehended that the lady is noise to blame for this, inasmuch as she herself of her compassion for me came down hither to excuse herself and to hearten me. And as thou sayest, that which hath not been tonight shall be another time. Commend me to her, and God be with thee." Therewithal, well nigh stark with cold, he made his way, as best he might, back to his house, where, being drowsed to death, he cast himself upon his bed to sleep and awoke well nigh crippled of his arms and legs. Wherefore, sending for sundry physicians and acquainting them with the cold he had suffered, he caused take order for his cure. The leeches, plying him with prompt and very potent remedies, hardly, after some time, availed to recover him of the shrinking of the sinews and cause them relax, and but that he was young and that the warm season came on, he had overmuch to suffer. However, being restored to health and lusty head, he kept his hate to himself and feigned himself more than ever enamored of his widow. Now it befell, after a certain space of time, that fortune furnished him with an occasion of satisfying his desire, for that the youth beloved of the widow being, without any regard for the love she bore him, fallen enamored of another lady, would have nor little nor much to say to her, nor do aught to pleasure her, wherefore she pined in tears and bitterness. But her maid, who had great compassion of her, finding no way of rousing her mistress from the chagrin into which the loss of her lover had cast her, and seeing the scholar pass along the street, after the wonted manner, entered into a fond conceit, to wit, that the lady's lover might be brought by some necromantic operation or other to love her as he had been wont to do, and that the scholar should be a past master in this manner of thing, and told her thought to her mistress. The latter, little wise, without considering that, had the scholar been acquainted with the black art, he would have practiced it for himself, lent her mind to her maid's words, and bade her forthright learn from him, if he would do it, and give him all assurance that, in requital thereof, she would do whatsoever pleased him. The maid did her errand well and diligently, which, when the scholar heard, he was overjoyed and said in himself, "Praised be thou, my God. The time is come, when with thine aid I may avail to make yonder wicked woman pay the penalty of the harm she did me in requital of the great love I bore her." Then to the maid, "Tell my lady," quoth he, "that she need be in no concern for this, for that, were her lover in the Indies, I would speedily cause him come to her and crave pardon of that which he hath done to displeasure her. But the means she must take to this end I purpose to impart to herself, when and where it shall most please her. So say to her, and hearten her on my part." The maid carried his answer to her mistress, and it was agreed that they should foregather at Santa Lucia del Prado, whither, accordingly, the lady, and the scholar being come and speaking together alone, she, remembering her not that she had aforetime brought him well nigh to death's door, openly discovered to him her case, and that which she desired, and besought him to succor her. "Madam," answered he, "it is true that amongst the other things I learned at Paris was necromancy, whereof for certain I know that which is extant thereof, but for that the thing is supremely displeasing unto God, I had sworn never to practice it either for myself or for others. Nevertheless, the love I bear you is of such potency that I know not how I may deny you aught that you would have me do. Wherefore, though it should behove me for this alone go to the devil's stead, I am yet ready to do it, since it is your pleasure. But I must forewarn you that the thing is more uneath to do than you perchance imagine, especially whenas a woman would recall a man to loving her or a man a woman, for that this cannot be done save by the very person unto whom it pertaineth. And it behoveth that whoso doth it be of an assured mind, seeing it must be done annats, and in solitary places without company. Which things I know not how you are disposed to do. The lady, more enamored than discreet, replied, Love spurreth me on such wise that there is nothing I would not do to have again him who hath wrongfully forsaken me. Algates, and it please you, show me in what I must approve myself assured of mind. Madam, replied the scholar, who had a patch of ill hair to his tail, I must make an image of pewter in his name whom you desire to get again, which weenas I shall send you. It will behove you 7 times bathe yourself therewith, all naked, in a running stream, at the hour of the first sleep, what time the moon is far on the wane. Thereafter, naked as you are, you must get you up into a tree or to the top of some uninhabited house, and turning to the north, with the image in your hand, 7 times running say certain words which I shall give you written. Which when you shall have done, there will come to you 2 of the fairest damsels you ever beheld, who will salute you, and ask you courteously what you would have done. Do you well and throughly discover to them your desires, and look it betide you not to name one for another. As soon as you have told them, they will depart, and you may then come down to the place where you shall have left your clothes and reclothe yourself and return home. And for certain, ere it be the middle of the ensuing night, your lover will come, weeping, to crave you pardon and mercy, and know that from that time forth he will never again leave you for any other. Footnote 385. A proverbial way of saying that he bore malice and was vindictive. The lady, hearing all this and lending entire faith thereto, was half comforted, her seeming she already had her lover again in her arms, and said, Never fear, I will very well do these things, and I have therefore the finest commodity in the world. For I have, towards the upper end of the Val d'Arno, a farm, which is very near the river bank, and it is now July, so that bathing will be pleasant. More by token that I mind me there is, not far from the stream, a little uninhabited tower, save that the shepherds climb up bytimes, by a ladder of chestnut wood that is there, to a solar at the top, to look for their strayed beasts. Otherwise it is a very solitary out-of-the-way place. Thither will I betake myself, and there I hope to do that which you shall enjoin me the best in the world. The scholar, who very well knew both the place and the tower mentioned by the lady, was rejoiced to be certified of her intent, and said, Madam, I was never in these part, and therefore know neither the farm nor the tower. But, an it be as you say, nothing in the world can be better. Wherefore, weenas it shall be time, I will send you the image and the conjuration. But I pray you instantly, weenas you shall have gotten your desire, and shall know I have served you well, that you be mindful of me, and remember to keep your promise to me. She answered that she would without fail do it, and taking leave of him, return to her house. Whilst the scholar, rejoiced for that him seemed his desire was like to have effect, made an image with certain talismanic characters of his own devising, and wrote a rigmarole of his fashion by way of conjuration. The which, weenas it seemed to him time, he dispatched to the lady, and sent to tell her that she must that very night, without more tarriance, do that which he had enjoined her. After which he secretly betook himself, with a servant of his, to the house of one of his friends who abode very near the tower, so he might give effect to his design. The lady, on her part, set out with her maid and repaired to her farm, where, as soon as the night was come, she made a show of going to bed and sent the maid away to sleep. But towards the hour of the first sleep, she issued quietly forth of the house and betook herself to the bank of the Arno hard by the tower, where, looking first well all about and seeing nor hearing any, she put off her clothes and hiding them under a bush, bathed 7 times with the image. After which, naked as she was, she made for the tower, image in hand. The scholar, who had, at the coming on of the night, hidden himself with his servant among the willows and other trees near the tower, and had witnessed all this, seeing her, as she passed thus naked close to him, overcome the darkness of the night with the whiteness of her body, and after considering her breast and the other parts of her person, and seeing them fair, bethought himself what they should become in a little while, and felt some compassion of her. Whilst, on the other hand, the pricks of the flesh assailed him of a sudden, and caused that stand on end which erst lay prone, inciting him to issue forth of his ambush and go take her, and do his will of her. Between the one and the other he was like to be overcome. But calling to mind who he was, and what the injury he had suffered and wherefore, and at whose hands, and he being thereby rekindled in despite and compassion and carnal appetite banished, he abode firm in his purpose and let her go. The lady, going up onto the tower and turning to the north, began to repeat the words given her by the scholar, who, coming quietly into the tower a while after, little by little removed the ladder, which led to the solar where she was, and after awaited that which she should do and say. Meanwhile, the lady, having 7 times said her conjuration, began to look for the 2 damsels, and so long was her waiting, more by token that she felt it cooler than she could have wished, that she saw the dawn appear. Whereupon, woeful that it had not befallen as the scholar had told her, she said in herself, I fear me yonder man hath had a mind to give me a night such as that which I gave him. But in that be his intent, he hath ill known to avenge himself, for that this night hath not been as long by a third as was his, forby that the cold was of anothergate sort. Then, so the day might not surprise her there, she proceeded to seek to go down from the tower, but found the ladder gone. Whereupon her courage forsook her, as it were the world had failed beneath her feet, and she fell down a swoon upon the platform of the tower. As soon as her sense returned to her, she fell to weeping piteously and bemoaning herself. And perceiving but too well that this must have been the scholar's doing, she went on to blame herself for having affronted others, and after for having overmuch trusted in him whom she had good reason to believe her enemy. And on this wise she abode a great while. Then, looking if there were no way of descending and seeing none, she fell again to her lamentation and gave herself up to bitter thought, saying in herself, Alas, unhappy woman! What will be said of thy brothers and kinsfolk and neighbors, and generally of all the people of Florence, when it shall be known that thou hast been found here naked? Thy repute that hath hitherto been so great will be known to have been false, and shouldst thou seek to frame lying excuses for thyself, if indeed there are any to be found, the accursed scholar, who knoweth all thine affairs, will not suffer thee lie. O wretched woman, that wilt at one stroke have lost the youth so ill-fatedly beloved, and thine own honor. Therewithal she fell into such a passion of woe that she was like to cast herself down from the tower to the ground. But the sun being now risen and she drawing near to one side of the walls of the tower, to look if any boy should pass with cattle, whom she might send for her maid, it chanced that the scholar, who had slept a while at the foot of a bush, awaking, saw her and she him. Whereupon quoth he to her, Good day, madam, are the damsels come yet? The lady, seeing and hearing him, began afresh to weep sore and besought him to come within the tower, so she might speak with him. In this he was courteous enough to comply with her, and she laying herself prone on the platform, and showing only her head at the opening, said, weeping, Assuredly, Rinnery, if I gave thee an ill night, thou hast well avenged thyself of me. For that, albeit it is July, I have thought to freeze this night, naked as I am, more by token that I have so sore bewept both the trick I put upon thee and mine own folly in believing thee that it is a wonder I have any eyes left in my head. Wherefore I entreat thee, not for the love of me, whom thou hast no call to love, but for the love of thyself, who are a gentleman, that thou be content, for vengeance of the injury I did thee, with that which thou hast already done, and cause fetch me my clothes and suffer me come down hence, nor seek to take from me that which thou couldst not after restore me, and thou wouldst, to wit, my honor. For if I took from thee the being with me that night, I can render thee many nights for that one, whensoever it liketh thee. Let this, then, suffice, and let it content thee, as a man of honor, to have availed to avenge thyself, and to have caused me confess it. Seek not to use thy strength against a woman. No glory is it for an eagle to have overcome a dove, wherefore, for the love of God and thine own honor, have pity on me. The scholar, with stern mind revolving in himself the injury suffered, and seeing her weep and beseech, felt at once both pleasure and annoy, pleasure in the revenge which he had desired more than aught else. And annoy he felt, for that his humanity moved him to compassion of the unhappy woman. However, humanity availing not to overcome the fierceness of his appetite, Madam Elena, answered he, if my prayers, which, it is true, I knew not to bathe with tears nor to make honeyed, as thou presently knowest to proffer thine, had availed, the night when I was dying of cold in thy snow-filled courtyard, to procure me to be put of thee but a little under cover. It were a light matter to me to hearken now unto thine. But if thou be presently so much more concerned for thine honor than in the past, and it be grievous to thee to abide up there naked, address these thy prayers to him in whose arms thou didst not scruple, that night which thou thyself recallest, to abide naked, hearing me the while go about thy courtyard, chattering with my teeth and trampling the snow, and get thee succor of him. Cause him fetch thee thy clothes, and set thee the ladder, whereby thou mayest descend, and study to inform him with tenderness for thine honor, the which thou hast not scrupled both now and 1,000 other times to imperil for him. Why dost thou not call him to come help thee? To whom pertaineth it more than unto him? Thou art his, and what should he regard or succor, and he regard not neither succor thee? Call him, silly woman that thou art, and prove if the love thou bearest him and thy wits and his together can avail to deliver thee from my folly, whereof, dallying with him the while, thou questionedst aforetime whether him seemed the greater, my folly, or the love thou borest him. Thou canst not now be lavish to me of that which I desire not, nor couldst thou deny it to me, and I desired it. Keep thy nights for thy lover, and it chance that thou come off hence alive, be they thine and his. I had overmuch of one of them, and it sufficeth me to have been once befooled. Again, using thy craft and wiliness in speech, thou studiest, by extolling me, to gain my goodwill and callest me a gentleman and a man of honor, thinking thus to cajole me into playing the magnanimous and forbearing to punish thee for thy wickedness. But thy blandishments shall not now darken me the eyes of the understanding, as did thy disloyal promises whiler. I know myself, nor did I learn so much of myself what while I sojourned at Paris, as thou taughtest me in one single night of thine. But granted I were indeed magnanimous, thou art none of those towards whom magnanimity should be shown. The issue of punishment, as likewise of vengeance, in the case of wild beasts such as thou art, behoveth to be death, whereas for human beings that should suffice whereof thou speakest. Wherefore, albeit I am no eagle, knowing thee to be no dove, but a venomous serpent, I mean to pursue thee as an immemorial enemy, with every hate and all my might, albeit this that I do to thee can scarce properly be styled vengeance, but rather chastisement, inasmuch as vengeance should overpass the offense, and this will not attain thereto. For that, and I sought to avenge myself, considering to what a pass thou broughtest my soul, thy life, should I take it from thee, would not suffice me, no, nor the lives of 100 others such as thou, since, slaying thee, I should but slay a vile, wicked, and worthless trull of a woman. And what a devil more account, setting aside this thy scantling of fair favor, which a few years will mar, filling it with wrinkles, art thou than whatsoever other sorry serving drab. Whereas it was no fault of thine that thou failedst of causing the death of a man of honor, as thou styledst me but now, whose life may yet in one day be of more service to the world than 100,000 of thy like, could be what while the world endureth. I will teach thee, then, by means of this annoy that thou sufferest, what it is to flout men of sense, and particularly scholars, and will give thee cause never more, and thou comest off alive, to fall into such a folly. But an thou have so great a wish to descend, why dost thou not cast thyself down? On this wise, with God's help, thou wilt, by breaking thy neck, at once deliver thyself from the torment, wherein it seemeth to thee thou art, and make me the joyfullest man in the world. Now I have no more to say to thee. I knew to contrive on such wise that I caused thee go up thither. Do thou now contrive to come down thence, even as thou knewest to befool me. Footnote 387. Boccaccio here misquotes himself. CP 389, where the lady says to her lover, whether seemeth to thee the greater, his wit or the love I bear him. This is only one of the numberless instances of negligence and inconsistency which occur in the Decameron, and which make it evident to the student that it must have passed into the hands of the public, without the final revision and correction by the author, that limy labor without which no book is complete, and which is especially necessary in the case of such a work as the present, where Boccaccio figures as the virtual creator of Italian prose. What while the scholar spoke thus, the wretched lady wept without ceasing, and the time lapsed by, the sun still rising high and higher. But when she saw that he was silent, she said, Alack, cruel man, if the accursed night was so grievous to thee, and if my default seemed to thee so heinous a thing that neither my young beauty nor my bitter tears and humble prayers may avail to move thee to any pity. At least let this act of mine alone some little move thee, and abate the rigor of thy rancor, to wit, that I but now trusted in thee, and discovered to thee mine every secret, opening withal to thy desire a way whereby thou mightest avail to make me cognizant of my sin. More by token that, except I had trusted in thee, thou hadst had no means of availing to take of me that vengeance, which thou seemest to have so ardently desired. For God's sake, leave thine anger and pardon me henceforth. I am ready, so thou wilt but forgive me and bring me down hence, altogether to renounce yonder faithless youth and to have thee alone to lover and lord, albeit thou decreest my beauty, avouching it short-lived and little worth. Nathless, whatever it be compared with that of other women, yet this I know, that, if for naught else it is to be prized for, that it is the desire and pastime and delight of men's youth, and thou art not old. And albeit I am cruelly entreated of thee, I cannot believe withal that thou wouldst fain see me die so unseemly a death as were the casting myself down from this tower, as in desperation, before thine eyes, wherein, and thou was not a liar as thou art since become, I was erst so pleasing. Alack, have ruth on me for God's sake and pities. The sun beginneth to wax hot, and like as the overmuch cold irked me this night, even so doth the heat begin to do me sore annoy. The scholar, who held her in parley for his diversion, answered, Madam, thou hast not presently trusted thine honor in my hands for any love that thou borest me, but to regain him whom thou hast lost, wherefore it meriteth but greater severity. And if thou think that this way alone was apt and opportune unto the vengeance desired of me, thou thinkest foolishly. I had 1,000 others. Nay, whilst feigning to love thee, I had spread 1,000 snares about thy feet, and it would not have been long, had this not chanced, ere thou must of necessity have fallen into one of them, nor couldst thou have fallen into any but it had caused thee greater torment and shame than this present, the which I took, not to ease thee, but to be the quicklier satisfied. And though all else should have failed me, the pen had still been left me, wherewithal I would have written such and so many things of thee, and after such a fashion that, weenas thou camest, as thou wouldst have come, to know of them, thou wouldst 1,000 times a day have wished thyself never born. The power of the pen is far greater than they imagine who have not proved it with experience. I swear to God, so may he gladden me to the end of this vengeance that I take of thee, even as he hath made me glad thereof in the beginning, that I would have written such things of thee, that, being ashamed, not to say before other folk, but before thine own self, thou shouldst have put out thine own eyes, not to see thyself in the glass, wherefore let not the little rivulet twit the sea with having caused it wax. Of thy love or that thou be mine, I reck not, as I have already said, a jot. Be thou e'en his and thou may, whose thou wast erst and whom, as I once hated, so at this present I love, having regard unto that which he hath wrought towards thee of late. You women go falling enamored of young springolds and covet their love, for that you see them somewhat fresher of color and blacker of beard, and they go erect and jaunty and dance and joust, all which things they have had who are somewhat more in years, aye, and these know that which those have yet to learn. Moreover, you hold them better cavaliers and deem that they fare more miles in a day than men of riper age. Certes, I confess that they jumble a wench's furbelows more briskly, but those more in years, being men of experience, know better where the fleas stick, and little meat and savory is far and away rather to be chosen than much and insipid, more by token that hard trotting undoth and wearieth folk, how young soever they be, whereas easy-going, though belike it bring one somewhat later to the inn, at the least carrieth him thither unfatigued. You women perceive not, animals without understanding that you are, how much ill lieth hid under this scantling of fair seeming. Young fellows are not content with one woman, nay, as many as they see, so many do they covet, and of so many them seemeth they are worthy, wherefore their love cannot be stable, and of this thou mayst presently of thine own experience bear very true witness. Them seemeth they are worthy to be worshipped and caressed of their mistresses, and they have no greater glory than to vaunt them of those whom they have had. The which default of theirs hath aforetime cast many a woman into the arms of the monks, who tell no tales. Albeit thou say'st that never did any know of thine amours, save thy maid and myself, thou knowest it ill and believest awry, and thou think thus. His quarter talketh well nigh of nothing else, and thine likewise, but most times the last to whose ears such things come is he to whom they pertain. Young men, to boot, despoil you, whereas it is given you of men of riper years. Since then thou hast ill chosen, be thou his to whom thou gavest thyself and leave me, of whom thou madest mock, to others, for that I have found a mistress of much more account than thou, who hath been wise enough to know me better than thou didst. And that thou mayst carry into the other world greater assurance of the desire of mine eyes than meseemeth thou gatherest from my words. Do but cast thyself down forthright, and thy soul, being, as I doubt not it will be, straightway received into the arms of the devil, will be able to see if mine eyes be troubled or not at seeing thee fall headlong. But as medouteth thou wilt not consent to do me so much pleasure, I counsel thee, if the sun begin to scorch thee, remember thee of the cold thou madest me suffer, which an thou mingle with the heat aforesaid, thou wilt without fail feel the sun attempered. Footnote 390. Via donato, i.e. young lovers look to receive gifts of their mistresses, whilst those of more mature age bestow them. The disconsolate lady, seeing that the scholar's words tended to a cruel end, fell again to weeping and said, Hearke, since nothing it can say availeth to move thee to pity of me, let the love move thee, which thou bearest that lady whom thou hast found wiser than I and of whom thou sayst thou art beloved, and for the love of her pardon me and fetch me my clothes, so I may dress myself, and cause me descend hence. Therewith the scholar began to laugh, and seeing that tierce was now past by a good hour, replied, Mary, I know not how to say thee nay, since thou conjurest me by such a lady. Tell me where thy clothes are, and I will go for them, and help thee come down from up yonder. The lady, believing this, was somewhat comforted, and showed him where she had laid her clothes. Whereupon he went forth of the tower, and bidding his servant not depart thence, but abide near at hand and watch as most he might that none should enter there, till such time as he should return, went off to his friend's house, where he dined at his ease, and after, weenas him seemed time, betook himself to sleep. Whilst the lady, left upon the tower, albeit some little heartened with fond hope, nathless beyond measure woebegone, sat up and creeping close to that part of the wall where there was a little shade, fell awaiting, in company of very bitter thoughts. There she abode, now hoping and now despairing of the scholar's return with her clothes, and passing from one thought to another, she presently fell asleep, as one who was overcome of dolour, and who had slept no whit the past night. The sun, which was exceeding hot, being now risen to the meridian, beat full and straight upon her tender and delicate body and upon her head, which was all uncovered, with such force that not only did it burn her flesh, wherever it touched it, but cracked and opened it all over little by little. And such was the pain of the burning that it constrained her to awake, albeit she slept fast. Feeling herself on the roast and moving somewhat, it seemed as if all her scorched skin cracked and clove asunder for the motion, as we see happen with a scorched sheepskin, if any stretch it, and to boot her head irked her so sore that it seemed it would burst, which was no wonder. And the platform of the tower was so burning hot that she could find no resting place there either for her feet or for other what. Wherefore, without standing fast, she still removed now hither and now thither, weeping. Moreover, there being not a breath of wind, the flies and gads flocked thither in swarms and settling upon her cracked flesh, stung her so cruelly that each prick seemed to her a pike stab, wherefore she stinted not to fling her hands about, still cursing herself, her life, her lover, and the scholar. Being thus by the inexpressible heat of the sun, by the flies and the gads, and likewise by hunger, but much more by thirst, and by 1,000 irksome thoughts, to boot, tortured and stung and pierced to the quick, she started to her feet and addressed herself to look if she might see or hear anyone near at hand, resolved, whatever might betide thereof, to call him and crave aid. But of this resource also had her unfriendly fortune deprived her. The husbandmen were all departed from the fields for the heat, more by token that none had come that day to work thenigh, they being all engaged in threshing out their sheaves beside their houses. Wherefore she heard naught but crickets and saw the Arno, which latter sight, provoking in her desire of its waters, abated not her thirst, but rather increased it. In several places also she saw thickets and shady places and houses here and there, which were all alike to her in anguish for desire of them. What more shall we say of the ill-starred lady? The sun overhead and the heat of the platform underfoot, and the stings of the flies and gads on every side had so entreated her that, whereas with her whiteness she had overcome the darkness of the foregoing night, she was presently grown red as ruddle, and all bescabbed as she was with blood, had seemed to whoso saw her the foulest thing in the world. Footnote 391, lit. Red as rabies rabia. Some commentators suppose that Boccaccio meant to write rabia matter. As she abode on this wise, without aught of hope or counsel, expecting death more than other what, it being now past half none, the scholar, arising from sleep and remembering him of his mistress, returned to the tower, to see what was come of her, and sent his servant, who was yet fasting, to eat. The lady, hearing him, came, all weak and anguishful as she was for the grievous annoy she had suffered, over against the trapdoor, and seating herself there, began, weeping, to say, Indeed, Rinieri, thou hast beyond measure avenged thyself. For, if I made thee freeze in my courtyard by night, thou hast made me roast, nay burn, on this tower by day and die of hunger and thirst to boot. Wherefore I pray thee by the one only God that thou come up hither, and since my heart suffereth me not give myself death with mine own hands, give it me thou, for that I desire it more than aught else. Such and so great are the torments I endure. Or, and thou wilt not do me that favor, let bring me, at the least, a cup of water, so I may wet my mouth, whereunto my tears suffice not. So sore is the drouth and the burning that I have therein. The scholar knew her weakness by her voice, and eke saw, in part, her body all burnt up of the sun. Wherefore, and for her humble prayers there overcame him a little compassion of her. But none the less he answered, Wicked woman, thou shalt not die by my hands. Nay, by thine own shalt thou die, and thou have a mind thereto. And thou shalt have of me as much water for the allaying of thy heat, as I had fire of thee for the comforting of my cold. This much I sore regret that, whereas it behoved me heal the infirmity of my cold with the heat of stinking dung, that of thy heat will be healed with the coolth of odoriferous rose-water. And whereas I was like to lose both limbs and life, thou, flayed by this heat, wilt abide fare none otherwise than doth the snake, casting its old skin. Alack, wretch that I am, cried the lady, God give beauties on such wise acquired to those who wish me ill. But thou, that are more cruel than any wild beast, how couldst thou have the heart to torture me after this fashion? What more could I expect from thee or any other, if I had done all thy kinsfolk to death with the cruelest torments? Certes, men knoweth not what greater cruelty could be wreaked upon a traitor who had brought a whole city to slaughter, than that whereto thou hast exposed me in causing me to be roasted of the sun and devoured of the flies, and withal denying me a cup of water. Weenas to murderers condemned of justice is oftentimes, as they go to their death, given to drink of wine, so but they ask it. Nay, since I see thee abide firm in thy savage cruelty, and that my sufferance availeth not anywise to move thee, I will resign myself with patience to receive death, so God, whom I beseech to look with equitable eyes upon this thy dealing, may have mercy upon my soul. So saying, she dragged herself painfully to the midward of the platform, despairing to escape alive from so fierce a heat. And not once, but 1,000 times, over and above her other torments, she thought to swoon for thirst, still weeping and bemoaning her ill hap. However, it being now vespers, and it seeming to the scholar he had done enough, he caused his servant take up the unhappy lady's clothes and wrap them in his cloak. Then, betaking himself to her house, he found her maid seated before the door, sad and disconsolate and unknowing what to do, and said to her, Good woman, what is come of thy mistress? Sir, replied she, I know not. I thought to find her this morning in the bed with her, meseemed I saw her betake herself yesternight, but I can find her neither there, nor otherwhere, and know not what is come of her. Wherefore I suffer the utmost concern. But you, sir, can you not tell me aught of her? Quoth he, Would I had had thee together with her whereas I have had her, so I might have punished thee of thy default, like as I have punished her for hers. But assuredly thou shalt not escape from my hands, ere I have so paid thee for thy dealings that thou shalt never more make mock of any man, without remembering thee of me. Then to his servant, Give her the clothes, quoth he, and bid her go to her mistress, and she will. The man did his bidding and gave the clothes to the maid, who, knowing them and hearing what Rinieri said, was sore afraid lest they should have slain her mistress and scarce refrained from crying out. Then, the scholar being done, she set out with the clothes for the tower, weeping the while. Now it chanced that one of the lady's husbandmen had that day lost 2 of his swine, and going in search of them, came, a little after the scholar's departure, to the tower. As he went spying about everywhere if he should see his hogs, he heard the piteous lamentation made of the miserable lady, and climbing up as most he might, cried out, "Who maketh moan there aloft?" The lady knew her husbandman's voice, and calling him by name, said to him, "For God's sake, fetch me my maid, and contrive so she may come up hither to me." Whereupon quoth the man, recognizing her, "Alack, madam, who hath brought you up yonder? Your maid hath gone seeking you all day, but who had ever thought you could be here?" Then, taking the ladder poles, he set them up in their place, and addressed himself to bind the cross staves thereto with withy bands. Meanwhile up came the maid, who no sooner entered the tower than, unable any longer to hold her tongue, she fell to crying out, buffeting herself the while with her hands, "Alack, sweet my lady, where are you?" The lady, hearing her, answered as loudly as she might, "O sister mine, I am here aloft. Weep not, but fetch me my clothes quickly." When the maid heard her speak, she was in a manner all recomforted, and with the husbandman's aid, mounting the ladder, which was now well nigh repaired, reached the solar, where, weenas she saw her lady lying naked on the ground, all forspent and wan, more as she were a half-burnt log than a human being, she thrust her nails into her own face and fell a-weeping over her, no otherwise than as she had been dead. Footnote 393. Boccaccio appears to have forgotten to mention that Rinieri had broken the rounds of the ladder when he withdrew it, as stated, p. 394, apparently to place an additional obstacle in the way of the lady's escape. The lady besought her for God's sake be silent and help her dress herself, and learning from her that none knew where she had been save those who had carried her the clothes and the husbandman there present, was somewhat comforted, and prayed them for God's sake never to say aught of the matter to anyone. Then, after much parley, the husbandman, taking the lady in his arms, for that she could not walk, brought her safely without the tower. But the unlucky maid, who had remained behind, descending less circumspectly, made a slip of the foot, and falling from the ladder to the ground, broke her thigh, whereupon she fell a-roaring for the pain, that it seemed a lion. The husbandman, setting the lady down on a plot of grass, went to see what ailed the maid, and finding her with her thigh broken, carried her also to the grass plat, and laid her beside her mistress, who, seeing this befallen in addition to her other troubles, and that she had broken her thigh by whom she looked to have been succored more than by any else, was beyond measure woebegone, and fell a-weeping afresh and so piteously that not only could the husbandman not avail to comfort her, but himself fell a-weeping likewise. But presently, the sun being now low, he repaired, at the instance of the disconsolate lady, lest the night should overtake them there, to his own house, and there called his wife and 2 brothers of his, who returned to the tower with a plank, and setting the maid thereon, carried her home, whilst he himself, having comforted the lady with a little cold water and kind words, took her up in his arms and brought her to her own chamber. His wife gave her a winesop to eat, and after, undressing her, put her to bed, and they contrived that night to have her and her maid carried to Florence. There, the lady, who had shifts and devices great plenty, framed a story of her fashion, altogether out of conformity with that which had passed, and gave her brothers and sisters, and everyone else to believe that this had befallen herself and her maid by dint of diabolical bewitchments. Physicians were quickly at hand, who, not without putting her to very great anguish and vexation, recovered the lady of a sore fever, after she had once and again left her skin sticking to the sheets, and on like wise healed the maid of her broken thigh. Wherefore, forgetting her lover, from that time forth she discreetly forbore both from making mock of others and from loving, whilst the scholar, hearing that the maid had broken her thigh, held himself fully avenged and passed on, content, without saying other what thereof. Thus, then, did it befall the foolish young lady of her pranks, for that she thought to fool it with a scholar as she would have done with another, unknowing that scholars' eye will not say all, but the most part of them know where the devil keepeth his tail. Wherefore, ladies, beware of making mock of folk, and especially of scholars. The 8th story. 2 men consorting together, one lieth with the wife of his comrade, who, becoming aware thereof, doth with her on such wise that the other is shut up in a chest, upon which he lieth with his wife, he being inside the while. Elena's troubles had been irksome and grievous to the ladies to hear. Natheless, For that they deemed them in part justly befallen her, they passed them over with more moderate compassion, albeit they held the scholar to have been terribly stern and obdurate, nay, cruel. But Pampinea being now come to the end of her story, the queen charged Fiametta follow on, who, nothing loath to obey, said, "Charming ladies, for that meseemeth the severity of the offended scholar hath somedel distressed you, I deem it well to solace your ruffled spirits with somewhat more diverting. Wherefore I purpose to tell you a little story of a young man who received an injury in a milder spirit, and avenged it after a more moderate fashion. By which you may understand that, ween as a man goeth about to avenge an injury suffered, it should suffice him to give as good as he hath gotten, without seeking to do hurt overpassing the behoof of the feud. You must know, then, that there were once in Siena, as I have understood aforetime, 2 young men in easy enough case and of good city families, whereof one was named Spinaloxio Taina and the other Zeppa di Mino, and they were next-door neighbors in Camalia. These 2 young men still companied together and loved each other, to all appearance, as they had been brothers or better, and each of them had a very fair wife. It chanced that Spinaloxio, by dint of much frequenting Zeppa's house, both when the latter was at home and when he was abroad, grew so private with his wife that he ended by lying with her, and on this wise they abode a pretty while, before any became aware thereof. However, at last, one day, Zeppa being at home, unknown to his wife, Spinaloxio came to call him, and the lady said that he was abroad. Whereupon the other came straightway up into the house, and finding her in the saloon and seeing none else there, he took her in his arms and fell to kissing her and she him. Zeppa, who saw this, made no sign, but abode hidden to see in what the game should result, and presently saw his wife and Spinaloxio betake themselves, thus embraced, to a chamber and there lock themselves in, whereat he was sore angered. But knowing that his injury would not become less for making an outcry nor for other what nay, that shame would but wax therefore, he set himself to think what revenge he should take thereof, so his soul might abide content, without the thing being known all about, and him seeming, after long consideration, he had found the means, he abode hidden so long as Spinaloxio remained with his wife. As soon as the other was gone away, he entered the chamber and there finding the lady, who had not yet made an end of adjusting her head veils, which Spinaloxio had plucked down in dallying with her, said to her, "Wife, what dost thou?" Quoth she, "Seest thou not?" And Zeppa answered, "Aye, indeed, I have seen more than I could wish." So saying, he taxed her with that which had passed, and she, in sore affright, confessed to him, after much parley, that which she could not aptly deny of her familiarity with Spinaloxio. Then she began to crave him pardon, weeping, and Zeppa said to her, "Hark, wife, thou hast done ill, and if thou wilt have me pardon it to thee, bethink thee punctually to do that which I shall enjoin thee, which is this. I will have thee bid Spinaloxio find an occasion to part company with me tomorrow morning, towards tierce, and come hither to thee. When he is here I will come back, and so soon as thou hearest me, do thou make him enter this chest here, and lock him therein. Then, when thou shalt have done this, I will tell thee what else thou shalt do, and have thou no fear of doing this, for that I promise thee I will do him no manner of hurt." The lady, to satisfy him, promised to do his bidding, and so she did. The morrow come, and Zeppa and Spinaloxio being together towards tierce, the latter, who had promised the lady to be with her at that hour, said to the former, "I am to dine this morning with a friend, whom I would not keep waiting for me, wherefore God be with thee." Quoth Zeppa, "It is not dinner time yet a while." But Spinaloxio answered, "No matter, I am to speak with him also of an affair of mine, so that needs must I be there betimes." Accordingly, taking leave of him, he fetched a compass and making for Zeppa's house, entered a chamber with the latter's wife. He had not been there long ere Zeppa returned, whom when the lady heard, feigning to be mightily affrighted, she made him take refuge in the chest, as her husband had bidden her, and locking him therein, went forth of the chamber. Zeppa coming up said, "Wife, is it dinner time?" "Aye," answered she forthright. Quoth he, "Spinaloxio is gone to dine this morning with a friend of his and hath left his wife alone. Get thee to the window and call her and bid her come dine with us." The lady, fearing for herself and grown therefore mighty obedient, did as he bade her, and Spinaloxio's wife, being much pressed by her, and hearing that her own husband was to dine abroad, came hither. Zeppa made much of her, and whispering his wife begone into the kitchen, took her familiarly by the hand and carried her into the chamber, wherein no sooner were they come than, turning back, he locked the door within. When the lady saw him do this, she said, Alack, Zeppa, what meaneth this? Have you then brought me hither for this? Is this the love you bear Spinaloxio, and the loyal companionship you practice towards him? Whereupon quoth Zeppa, drawing near to the chest wherein was her husband locked up and holding her fast, Madam, ere thou complainest, hearken to that which I have to say to thee. I have loved and love Spinaloxio as a brother, and yesterday, albeit he knoweth it not, I found that the trust I had in him was come to this, that he lieth with my wife even as with thee. Now, for that I love him, I purpose not to take vengeance of him, save on such wise as the offense hath been. He hath had my wife, and I mean to have thee. And thou wilt not, needs must I take him here, and for that I mean not to let this affront go unpunished. I will play him such a turn that neither thou nor he shall ever again be glad. The lady, hearing this and believing what Zeppa said, after many affirmations made her of him, replied, Zeppa mine, since this vengeance is to fall on me, I am content, so but thou wilt contrive, notwithstanding what we are to do, that I may abide at peace with thy wife, even as I intend to abide with her, notwithstanding this that she hath done to me. Assuredly, rejoined Zeppa, I will do it, and to boot, I will give thee a precious and fine jewel as none other thou hast. So saying, he embraced her. Then, laying her flat on the chest, there to his heart's content, he solaced himself with her, and she with him. Spinaloxio, hearing from within the chest all that Zeppa said his wife's answer, and feeling the moristance that was toward over his head, was at first so sore despited that him seemed he should die. And but that he stood in fear of Zeppa, he had rated his wife finely, shut up as he was. However, bethinking himself that the offense had begun with him, and that Zeppa was in his right to do as he did, and had indeed borne himself towards him humanely and like a comrade, he presently resolved in himself to be, and he would, more than ever his friend. Zeppa, having been with the lady so long as it pleased him, dismounted from the chest, and she asking for the promised jewel, he opened the chamber door and called his wife, who said naught else than, Madam, you have given me a loaf for my bannock. And this, she said, laughing. To her quoth Zeppa, Open this chest. Accordingly she opened it, and therein Zeppa showed the lady her husband, saying, Here is the jewel I promised thee. It were hard to say which was the more abashed of the twain, Spinaloxio, seeing Zeppa and knowing that he knew what he had done, or his wife, seeing her husband and knowing that he had both heard and felt that which she had done over his head. But Spinaloxio, coming forth of the chest, said, without more parley, Zeppa, we are quits. Wherefore it is well, as thou saidst but now to my wife, that we be still friends as we were, and that, since there is nothing unshared between us two but our wives, we have these also in common. Zeppa was content, and they all four dined together in the utmost possible harmony. And thenceforward each of the two ladies had 2 husbands, and each of the latter 2 wives, without ever having any strife or grudge anent the matter. Footnote 395, Danza Trivigiana lit. Trevisan dance, O.E. The shaking of the sheets.